In the grand hall of Caldwell Manor, a glass of red wine crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces and spreading across the marble like a raw wound. Naomi Carter knelt to clean it, under the sharp, mocking stares of the guests. Vanessa Sharp, an embittered former assistant, curled her lips into a sneer and hissed, "Go on, clean it! That's where you belong." The public humiliation burned like salt pressed into an open cut. Then from upstairs, a piercing cry broke through the hall, silencing every whisper. Naomi lifted her head, her eyes blazing, her voice steady. That cry, it means something. Could a humble maid expose a ruthless scheme, or would injustice swallow her? Stay with us to see what happens next. Glasses clinked through the grand hall of Caldwell Manor, crystal lights glittering across tuxedos and ball gowns. Naomi Carter crouched low, scrubbing a spill of red wine from the marble floor. Her rubber gloves were damp and cold, the sting of cleaning chemicals filling her nose. No one noticed her, just a shadow in the midst of luxury, until Richard Caldwell barked, "Who broke that glass? What kind of staff do I have here?" Every eye turned. Naomi froze, pressing the rag hard against the stone. Drops of water slipped down, catching the chandelier's glow like shards of glass. A memory surged back, kneeling on the kitchen floor with her younger brother, while their mother, Evelyn, scrambled to make ends meet. The boy's cries, dismissed as a nuisance, still echoed in her mind. Now the sting of humiliation returned, yet Naomi kept her back straight, refusing to bow. A young guest kicked an empty glass toward her and sneered, "Go on, clean it. Probably the only thing you're good at." Naomi lifted her head, her dark eyes steady, unrebellious yet unbroken. She carefully set the glass back on the table, then polished the floor in slow, deliberate strokes, clinging to her dignity against a storm of scorn. Suddenly, a cry rang out from upstairs, sharp, searing. Not the whine of a restless child, but a sound scraped raw from the chest. The crowd turned, some shivering at its edge. Naomi stood frozen, rag dripping in her hand, her heart tightening. She knew that cry. Elijah, Richard's son, the boy often left alone in his storms of panic, unseen and unheard. Vanessa Sharp, the former assistant fired for embezzlement, slipped in with a voice like ice. "A maid nosing into the master's family?" Daniel Ross will be delighted to hear Richard's lost control at home. Her smirk hinted at her dealings with Daniel, COO of Helix Tech, scheming to smear Richard and profit from a rival. Naomi gripped the rag tighter, her gaze locking on Richard. "I just want to know if the boy's safe." Richard scowled, then strode quickly upstairs, leaving Naomi under the crowd's judgment. A chill stirred inside her. Somehow she knew. Tonight, Elijah's cry would change everything. Elijah's cries still echoed from upstairs, tearing through the polished air of Caldwell Manor. Guests whispered with annoyance, "A billionaire's child screaming like that? Unbelievable." Naomi Carter stood near the staircase, heart pounding, eyes fixed upward. Memories of her younger brother crying in their kitchen flooded back, her mother Evelyn holding him tight with no explanation to give. Now Elijah's cries pulled Naomi out of silence, as if calling her. Richard Caldwell stopped midway up the stairs, his icy gaze sweeping the staff. Who dares step into the restricted wing? Though not aimed directly at her, dozens of eyes turned Naomi's way, branding her with blame. Vanessa Sharp, the disgraced assistant fired for embezzlement, slid in with a voice sharp as glass. "A maid, curious about the master's family?" Daniel Ross will laugh when he sees Richard losing control like this. Her words betrayed her scheme, an alliance with Daniel, COO of Helix Tech, to smear Richard, tarnish the Caldwell name, and profit from rival stock manipulations. Heat rose to Naomi's face. She clenched the rag in her hands, water dripping onto the marble, glittering like broken glass under the chandelier. The sharp sting of bleach blurred her eyes, yet she raised her head, voice steady. "I'm only worried the boy might be hurt." Richard narrowed his eyes, something flickering, an echo of his late wife's tenderness for Elijah. An assistant butler cut in coldly, "Your job is cleaning floors. Don't step beyond it." Laughter spread through the hall like spilled oil, stinging Naomi like barbs. She reached into her pocket, brushing her fingers against a faded handkerchief, her mother Evelyn's keepsake, drawing strength. She whispered only for herself, "Elijah, I won't abandon you." The words became a silent vow, steadying her under their stares. From the corner, Clara, the aging housekeeper, sighed. Not everyone hears a child's real cry. Her voice pierced the pride of the room, making a few guests pause. Naomi stepped toward the stairs, defiant. Richard turned and climbed upward, leaving her to face the growing weight of judgment. Elijah's cries still cut through the night, raw, relentless, a plea meant for her alone. Naomi placed one heavy step after another on the oak staircase of Caldwell Manor. Her hand clung to the icy rail, the sharp scent of varnish seeping into her skin. Elijah's cries thundered from above, slicing through the lavish atmosphere of the party like a frayed wire. Below, guests clustered together, whispering curiously, "The Caldwell boy? Why can't anyone calm him down?" An assistant butler blocked her path, his words clipped and hard. "Staff aren't allowed up here. Go back to your duties." The crowd stirred, a woman in pearls sneering, "Does she think she's some kind of savior?" Naomi gripped the railing tighter, the hardness of the wood grounding her. "This cry isn't ordinary," she answered, voice unwavering. "Elijah needs someone who understands him." Richard Caldwell turned sharply, his eyes cutting like blades. "And what could you possibly know about my son?" The insult landed heavy, like a stone on her chest. Naomi touched the faded handkerchief in her pocket, the keepsake from her mother Evelyn, who once soothed her brother's cries, and drew strength. "I know a cry for help when I hear one," she said, meeting Richard's eyes. For an instant, his late wife's gentleness with Elijah flickered in his memory. From the hall below, Clara, the elder housekeeper, spoke out with steady strength. "There are cries no power can silence. Only compassion can ease them." Her words pierced the pride of the room, leaving several guests unsettled. Naomi glanced down, nodded faintly, feeling Clara's quiet support. "Give me a chance, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly but firmly, her voice carrying like a promise to Elijah, though she hadn't yet seen him. In the corner, Vanessa Sharp covertly texted Daniel Ross, COO of Helix Tech. "She's disrupting. Push the plan forward." Her scheme was clear now. Cast out for embezzlement, she meant to exploit Elijah's distress to smear Richard and give Daniel leverage in the corporate war. The whispers grew, eyes weighed heavily on Naomi. Still, she climbed another step. Richard pressed his lips tight, gripping the rail, but didn't stop her. Elijah's sobs softened into broken gasps, as if waiting for her. The grand hall fell silent. Naomi's figure disappeared into the hallway, where Elijah's door stood slightly ajar. Naomi eased open Elijah's door, the hinges groaning as light from a sensory projector flickered across the room. Elijah Caldwell was curled on the thick rug, pounding his fists against a bookshelf. His forehead burned red, his sobs mixing with the hollow thud of wood. Guests crowded the hallway as the assistant butler shouted, "What's she doing in the young master's room?" Richard Caldwell appeared at the doorway, his voice booming. "Get out of here now!" Naomi froze. Elijah's cry ripped higher, slicing through the air like blades. Naomi dropped to her knees a few steps away, her voice gentle. "Elijah, I'm here. You're not alone." She placed her handkerchief on the rug, tracing a soft, safe sign with her fingers, her eyes steady. Elijah looked up, tear-streaked, his gaze locking on the cloth. His fists slowed as if he recognized a signal from somewhere deep inside. Vanessa Sharp pushed forward, shrill. "A maid touching the young master? Daniel Ross will make the Caldwells pay for this chaos." Her plot was plain. Fired for embezzlement, she now sought to exploit Elijah's distress, giving Daniel, COO of Helix Tech, leverage in the stock war. The guests murmured. A few even snickered. "Who does she think she is?" Clara, the elder housekeeper, stepped from the hall. Her raspy voice carried firm. "I saw Elijah cry after his mother passed. Only arms that hold, not commands, can help him." The words cut through the arrogance of the room. Some guests lowered their eyes. Naomi kept the safe gesture steady. Elijah crawled toward her, trembling fingers brushing the handkerchief before he rested his head on her shoulder. His sobs softened into quiet whimpers, like a storm easing against a harbor. "You're safe now, Elijah," Naomi whispered. The boy looked up, his eyes glistening, his small hand clutching the cloth tight. "Put him down," Richard barked, though his stare faltered. For a moment, the sight of his calm son stirred memories of his late wife holding Elijah the same way. The hall fell silent. Guests held their breath, waiting. Would Richard pull his son away or allow Naomi to stay? In the shadows, Vanessa typed furiously to Daniel, "She's gaining ground. Do something." Pressure swelled. Yet in that fragile instant, Elijah's head on Naomi's shoulder glowed like a candle flickering against the storm. "Put him down!" Richard Caldwell's roar shook the room. Guests crowded the hallway, and a man shouted, "A maid daring to hold the young master?" Shameful. Laughter broke out, sharp as thorns against skin. Naomi Carter stayed on the rug, holding Elijah close. The boy trembled in her arms, clutching the faded handkerchief, her mother Evelyn's keepsake that once comforted her brother. Mockery pounded in her head, but she gently wrapped the cloth around Elijah's shoulders, humming an old tune. Her warm, steady voice breathed over him. "You're safe, Elijah." The calm spread through his small body, easing the panic. Richard lunged forward and yanked Naomi's wrist. She slammed into the bookshelf, the smell of aged wood and a burst of dust filling the air. Elijah wailed harder, a shrill cry like a siren tearing ears. Naomi winced, her heart sinking into despair under the judgmental stares. Vanessa Sharp pushed in, shrieking, "She's destroying everything!" Daniel Ross will use this to topple the Caldwells. Her scheme was clear. Fired for embezzlement, she had joined Daniel, COO of Helix Tech, to smear Richard and seize advantage in the stock war. Suddenly, Dr. Hannah Brooks, Elijah's psychologist, appeared at the doorway holding an old photograph. "Mr. Caldwell, Naomi's connecting, not harming," she said, lifting the picture of Elijah glowing in his mother's embrace, eyes once so bright. "What he needs is arms that hold, not commands." Richard's grip faltered, torn by memory. His late wife's tenderness flashed before him. Elijah hiccuped, his trembling fingers tracing the word "safe" on Naomi's cloth, as if answering. Naomi kept singing softly, her voice unsteady. "I hear you, Elijah." The boy lifted his tear-streaked face, a spark of recognition in his eyes, gripping the cloth tighter. The hall went still. A woman whispered, "He's responding." Clara, the elder housekeeper, nodded firmly. "She hears the real cry." "Don't let her fool you," Vanessa shrieked, but her voice fell flat. A guest raised a phone high. "I've recorded everything." Naomi held Elijah closer, a fragile hope glowing through the humiliation. Richard stared at his son, his face taut with conflict. If that video spread across social media, everything would change. But could Naomi withstand the storm about to break? The cold blue glow of raised phones lit Naomi Carter as she knelt on the rug, holding Elijah Caldwell close. The boy clung tighter to the faded handkerchief. Whispers swelled in the hallway. Guests pressed forward. Someone shouted, "I've got it all recorded." "The press will know soon." Naomi hesitated, heart racing. But Elijah traced the sign for safe on the cloth again, urging her on. Remembering her mother Evelyn's words, "If you tremble, open your hand instead." Naomi rose to her feet. She held Elijah against her chest, her voice firm. "If you want me gone, then say it in front of everyone. Elijah needs arms, not commands." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few scoffed, but Naomi stood steady. She pressed the handkerchief into Elijah's palm. "You can speak." "I've already heard you." Elijah looked up, eyes shining, and signed safe again. Clearer this time. Richard Caldwell snapped, "What do you think you're doing?" Yet his eyes faltered at the sight of his son, so calm. Vanessa Sharp screeched, "She's destroying everything. Daniel Ross will use this to bring the Caldwells down." But another guest lifted a phone, shouting, "She's the one recording Richard in secret." On the screen, Vanessa's messages flashed. "Apply pressure. Break Caldwell's image." The hall erupted. "A conspiracy," guests shouted. Clara, the elder housekeeper, stepped forward, her voice cutting sharply. "Naomi's giving this boy a language. All she's brought is deceit." Her words split the air like a blade. Naomi turned to Richard, her tone low and steady. "You have to choose. Leave Elijah unseen and forgotten, or let him feel the love and care that's his. I'm not afraid of their stares anymore. As if to prove her point, Elijah gripped the cloth tighter. The hall held its breath. Richard stood frozen, memories of his late wife cradling their son flooding back. He faltered. A guest voice rang out. The press will know the truth. The room shifted. Naomi held Elijah firmly, her eyes unshaken, waiting for Richard's judgment in the heart of the storm. The video's already on social media, a guest shouted, the cold blue-white glow of phones lighting the hall of Caldwell Manor. Naomi Carter held Elijah close. The boy pressed against her, his small hand clutching the long-faded handkerchief. She stood tall, her eyes unwavering. This isn't a rag. This is what let Elijah show the sign for safe. No wealth, no power can buy that. Her voice carried steady and sharp, cutting through the pride of the room. The crowd stirred. A woman wiped tears from her cheeks. The boy really did respond to her. Vanessa Sharp screamed, it's all a trick. But a guest yanked the phone from her hand. On the glowing screen, her messages to Daniel Ross, COO of Helix Tech, flashed clear. Destroy Caldwell's image. Take the shares. Fury swept the hall. A plot to ruin Richard, voices roared. Vanessa's scheme was laid bare. Fired for embezzlement, she had sided with Daniel to smear Richard, manipulate Helix Tech's stock, and profit from revenge. Clara, the elder housekeeper, stepped forward, her voice hard as steel. She's brought us nothing but lies. The words sliced the air. Vanessa faltered, stumbling back in shame. Elijah lifted his gaze to Naomi, then traced the sign for safe once more, his small fingers drawing it clearly on the cloth, this time toward the crowd. The hall held its breath. A man whispered, that can't be faked. The boy chose her. Richard Caldwell stood frozen, his eyes torn, memories of his late wife's gentle arms rising again. Finally, his voice broke through, unsteady but clear. I was wrong. Naomi's not destroying anything. She understands and loves my son. Applause erupted, thunderous and long, shaking the hall with a single united sound. Naomi hugged Elijah tighter, whispering, you did so well, Elijah. The boy looked up, his eyes shining, his hand clutching the cloth in reply. Suddenly, a staff member rushed in, whispering urgently to Richard. Reporters are gathered at the gates, demanding to see Naomi. Vanessa went pale, muttering, Daniel won't forgive this. The crowd buzzed louder as flashbulbs burst outside the manor's gates. Naomi stood firm, Elijah in her arms, her heart pounding. The storm of the press was coming, but this time, she wasn't alone. She had allies. Flashbulbs from reporters outside Caldwell Manor burst in steady waves, lighting Naomi Carter as she held Elijah close. The boy pressed into her shoulder, his small hand still gripping the faded handkerchief. Richard Caldwell and Clara, the elder housekeeper, stepped forward to face the press. Vanessa Sharp was restrained by security, her phone held up as proof of her messages with Daniel Ross, COO of Helix Tech. Destroy Caldwell's image. Take the shares. The crowd roared louder. Justice must be heard. Richard raised his voice, firm though trembling. Tonight, before you all, I declare this. Naomi Carter is not destroying anything. She's given my son the love and safety I've failed to provide for far too long. He turned on Vanessa, his eyes cold. You conspired with Daniel Ross to exploit Elijah and tarnish my family. Her scheme laid bare, fired for embezzlement, she had joined Daniel in revenge and greed. Vanessa stood exposed. The crowd erupted in applause, chants of, justice always prevails. Rising above her excuses, Clara placed a steady hand on Naomi's shoulder and whispered, you've protected dignity, and now justice stands with you. Naomi smiled faintly, lowering her head to Elijah. See? They're listening to us now. Elijah looked up and waved his small hand toward the crowd, a living proof of truth. The applause thundered like rolling firecrackers. A mother in the crowd wiped her tears. She didn't just save that boy. She gave us hope, listening and understanding. That's the key to everything good. Vanessa was led away, muttering, Daniel won't let this go. But no one cared. A guard announced, Daniel Ross will also face charges for collusion and market manipulation. Naomi hugged Elijah tighter, Feeling his warmth spread through the faded cloth, she whispered, "You're so strong, Elijah." The boy rested his head against her shoulder, eyes shining, as if finding safe harbor after a storm. Richard gently placed his hand on Naomi's shoulder. His voice rang steady, yet warm. "You're not just an employee. You're part of my family now." The words melted the wall of doubt that had stood so long. The air softened. Faces once filled with suspicion now glowed with respect. Naomi lifted her head, facing the flash of cameras without fear. In that moment, she understood. Justice doesn't begin with cold accusations. It starts with a cry that's heard, and a heart willing to trust enough to understand. Outside the gates of Caldwell Manor, flashbulbs lit the night like lightning. Dozens of microphones stretched forward like spears, all aimed at Naomi Carter. Yet she stood steady, her hand resting lightly on Elijah's shoulder. The boy pressed close, seeking her like a safe harbor. Beside them, Richard Caldwell and Clara, the silver-haired housekeeper, walked in silence, pillars of strength against the storm. Amid the chaos of voices, Elijah suddenly smiled. Small, fragile, like a candle in the wind, yet powerful enough to silence the crowd. Within a heartbeat, that hush burst into thunderous applause, echoing against the stone walls and rolling outward like a tide, sweeping away doubt and leaving only faith. A journalist's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "You were just a maid. How could you possibly earn this trust?" Naomi lifted her head. Her eyes shone, steady and unshaken. To hear a cry lost in a house, you don't need power or titles. You only need the courage to sit, to listen, and a heart willing to understand. Her words drifted through the night, recalling the grand party when she was mocked for holding a mop. Now those same hands had become a symbol of compassion. Richard placed a firm, tender hand on her shoulder. His voice was warm but resolute. "She didn't just save my son. She is family." Breath caught in the crowd. Then the hall erupted like a breaking dam, hearts beating together in the name of justice. Elijah looked up, clutching the handkerchief to his chest as if it held his whole world. Naomi bent down, pressing a soft kiss to his hair, her voice trembling but warm. "You spoke, Elijah, and we listened." The boy's smile shone, his eyes bright as starlight. He threw his arms around Naomi, holding tight, trembling yet sure. Clara brushed away a tear, whispering words that felt timeless. "Justice isn't far. It waits for patient hearts." Applause surged again, like a chorus of trust rediscovered. The same eyes that once scorned Naomi now turned toward her, with reverence. Elijah leaned against her shoulder, clutching the cloth tight, as if declaring all fear behind them. Vanessa was already led away. Daniel bowed his head before the cameras. Those who once sought to devour a family now exposed by truth itself. In Naomi's arms, warmth bloomed. She no longer felt like an outsider. She had found her home. Richard paused, then smiled, his gaze glowing like a lantern at the end of a hallway. "Naomi, you're not just family. You are the heart that taught us what justice truly means." In that stillness, Elijah's smile lit the night, reflected in the crystal chandeliers above, proof that a single cry, once heard, could change the world. Justice begins with listening and understanding. If you heard a forgotten cry, would you turn away or step closer? That day closed with a scene both profound and straightforward. Naomi Carter, once forced to her knees to wipe red wine from the marble floor under mocking laughter at Caldwell Manor, now stood tall beside Elijah. The boy pressed against her, his small hand clutching the faded handkerchief from his mother, Evelyn, as if it carried the comfort of a family long lost. Flashbulbs burst around them, no longer spears of threat, but mere light. Elijah traced the sign for safe, his smile blooming like morning sunlight, reflected in Naomi's tear-filled eyes. Richard Caldwell and Clara stood nearby. The barrier of master and servant dissolved. What remained was a family bound by trial. Naomi bent low and whispered into Elijah's damp hair. "You spoke, and the world listened." The boy clung tighter, his small fingers tracing one last safe on the cloth, sealing it as something eternal. Clara brushed away her tears, her voice trembling. You've given him a new home, Naomi. Richard nodded, his gaze soft in a way it had never been before. You've shown me what I was blind to all along. The scheme of Vanessa Sharp and Daniel Ross to smear Richard and seize Helix Tech shares had collapsed. Vanessa was led away in cuffs. Daniel now faced prosecution. Yet the lesson remained. Deceit may dazzle for a time, but only compassion can truly prevail. Justice doesn't come from power, wealth, or glittering chandeliers. It rises from arms that open when the world turns away. A faded handkerchief, Elijah's bright smile, and the quiet unity of a community had become a symbol. Truth will always find its way. Justice begins with a cry that's heard. And if one day you hear a cry forgotten, will you turn away or listen?